Alright, this is the first climb of the Spiderjack 3. I'm not used to it at all. I don't know if it's set up properly, but we're gonna find out. So I'm gonna be pretty timid, so you can't blame me. And I'm excited to use it though. Very, very, very. So here on a Saturday afternoon, I'm early actually on the job. It tends its own slack, like kind of, but when you sit back on it, like it's got to be kind of abrupt. I have the double swivel going here. So it's not really that it tends its own slack, it's that it's so loose that it just goes through. And if you don't sit on it quickly, then it kind of goes through on your way down. And there's a little of a kind of, what do you call it? You're gonna go down a couple of inches every time. You know, every time you decide to sit in it. So I'm just practicing on it. I'm gonna cut these little nubbies off. I'm gonna go a bit higher. Maybe do some of that stuff. Maybe do some of this. We'll see how it goes. And you can lock it like that and it stays in position. You know what I mean? It stays in position. Take this guy. Oh, and I want to undo that one. I came into my flip line last time. So actually it should be unlock it, and that's to descend or to rappel. Cool. So
Alright, well, this was my first climb using the Spiderjack. Spiderjack 3, I should say. Because there's a big difference between the 3 and the 2 and the 1. In case you guys didn't notice, I mentioned it at first, but this one tends its own slack. Now, the way it does this is that the opening is just so big that when you pull the rope through it, it just goes through it with no friction. So it's not like a friction knot in that way. So a couple of notes. To descend or to rappel, it's a little bit tricky to learn. That black lever that you see, you can pull that and you're just gonna go fucking down. Like mad fast and shit. And then that piece I'm pushing with my thumb, that's the brake. So you can control the speed that you descend with that. But if you're not sitting on it completely, then you don't really need the brake. So if you're doing a limb walk or something like that, or if you have a foot or 2 feet in a crotch or against the tree, you know, you might not need the brake. Well, you know, again, this is all at your own risk, right? And, you know, I'm no fucking expert. I've used it for about 2 hours so far. And, you know, I'm learning as I go. And, you know, that's why, again, I was climbing very timidly with it. So, another thing, I have it set, you can use, there are 3 different size settings for rope. So I have it set for 11 to 12 millimeter rope, I believe. And I'm using 11.7 millimeter rope. Because I bought new rope for it, and I was looking at it in the store. I had it set up on the tree, and I couldn't figure out the way the device worked. I thought it worked, well, it does work like a friction knot and pulley combination, but it's not going to hold its position. You know, if you kind of, like if you set your DRT line in the crotch, well, it's made to be used off a pulley, actually. I'll get into that later, but if you set it into a crotch, let's say, and then you install a Spiderjack on the bottom and you just leave it hanging there inert, like as you put the rest of your gear on, like there's a chance it'll slide down the rope a little bit, because that's the self-tending feature. So I couldn't figure this out at the store, and I was trying all these different types of rope, and I was trying the, you know, the 11.1 millimeter rope that I love so much. It's not pictured in this video, but I love that rope, but I was going to buy 150 feet of it for it, but I tried it in it and it just slipped through, and I thought, oh man, this thing won't lock, you know, surely there's a fucking mistake. So I bought this 11.7 millimeter rope thinking it was safer, but that's why when you notice sometimes before, when I'm climbing up it, because I have a theory, so when I'm climbing up it and I'm climbing hand over hand, now this is where it self-tends itself, because if you pull the rope straight down, it goes right through the Spiderjack. You know, with no bends, it just goes right through, like kind of what I did there, but I pulled it a little bit too much. See, there, it just goes right through, and that's just one-handed. So if you're climbing, like with your weight on the rope, and you climb hand over hand with 2 hands, like it will tend its own slack. But I bought this way thicker rope, so it would be on the thicker side, so there would be more friction in the device, because at the store when I was buying it, again, I thought, surely this has to be a mistake, and better safe than sorry. But honestly, I think the self-tending feature is going to be better with thinner rope. Now, again, within the specifications, but I have a feeling that this 11.1 millimeter rope that I love is going to be fucking awesome in it. So I've got 50 feet, I've got 25 feet also, lengths of it left over, because I had 150 feet, but I cut into my line a couple of times by accident. So, you know, I cut it and shortened it into smaller pieces. So, but I'm going to do a couple of tests, because I suspect and theorize that the self-tending feature is going to be fucking amazing with slightly thinner rope. The other thing too, I was really trying to maximize the efficiency of this tool when I was climbing with it. So again, if it looks kind of timid, or if I look shaky climbing up, the way I climb usually is with a distal hitch and a pulley. Kind of like a hitch climber pulley. It's a floatich pulley, or floatich, or floatic, or whatever. I don't know how the fuck you pronounce it, but it's the same fucking shit, man. It's on my, you can see it hang off my harness. It's a little purple guy. I have that in the distal hitch just in case there's a problem. So another thing worth mentioning, yeah, so I climb off that usually, and it's cool, man. I'm really used to it, but there's a lot of friction. So, like, I either climb hand over hand and then pull the slack through my knot, but again, there's usually a lot of fucking friction when I do this, or I'll have one hand above the knot and one hand below, and I'll pull down and down with both hands, you know. But with the Spiderjack, you don't really need to do that. and because there's so little friction. So even if you're not able to use the self-tending feature, like even if you climb hand over hand, like when you do have to pull the slack out, like let's say you climb with a friction hitch and a pulley, and you climb, let's say 10 feet hand over hand before pulling any of your slack out. You know, and if you don't pull the slack out and you just sit on your fucking safety line and you let go, you're going to fall 10 feet, right? So you got to pull that fucking slack out. But if you do that, like which I do sometimes, you know, when I climb on a hitch and a pulley, you get really tired. And it takes a lot of effort. And sometimes if you need to milk your rope, which I did, I had to milk the same fucking rope twice. Real fucking pain, man. After climbing 80-foot trees, it fucking sucks, man. It destroys your fucking forearms. So, you know, after doing that, there's a lot of friction. So if you climb this way on the Spiderjack, and even if you're not able to fully capitalize on the self-tending feature, what's very fucking cool about it is that when you climb hand over hand and you've got this fucking handful of slack that you need to tend, you just pull that shit right through and it slides through like butter. Very fucking minimal effort. Another thing worth mentioning is that when you want the fucking lock to engage, well, not the lock, you know, when you want the lock to engage, you actually flip that little button thingy with your hand on the other side of it. But if you want the brake to engage, you know, like you have to simulate, or you have to put a load on it. But if you do this gently, it's not, you know, you might slip through. So you have to trust it. You gotta really fucking sit on it fucking quick. You know, it likes it rough a little bit. Just like fucking some women. No, just like all women. But I digress. And another thing also, you notice it was spinning around a little bit. Well, I usually climb with I always climb with a Petzl micro swivel. That, yeah, and I'm experimenting putting my chainsaw on that way because I saw it in a couple of videos, but it doesn't fucking work for me. But yeah, so I always climb with a Petzl micro swivel. At first, I like the Petzl one because it's fucking, you can open it up. It's got an unlocking gate, so it's fucking awesome. So you can, it's basically midline attachable, or you can put it onto a ring. So I used to have a micro swivel directly on my rope bridge, on my harness, and then for my second line, I would clip my second line directly to the rope bridge, and then I wanted a swivel for my second line. So I just put two micro swivels next to each other on my rope bridge. But sometimes your second line isn't on the side that your second swivel is on. You know, you could be tied in to one of them, and the spare swivel is on the right hand side, and then you want to tie a spare line on the left hand side, so you have to fucking undo it. It's kind of complicated. So I put it on, I put the center ring back onto the bridge, and I put both my swivels on the center ring. See, as you can see right there, so that way I can just rotate it around to whatever side I need. But the Spiderjack comes with its own swivel. And, you know, I'm going somewhere with this, so just fucking bear with me. Or if it's too fucking hard for you to understand, then because you have fucking low attention span, and, well, I don't even know what you're doing here anyway. So, yeah, get the fuck off my channel. So, the Spiderjack comes with its own swivel. And this is for a couple of reasons, but it's basically for the same reason that I like climbing with swivels. Because you can turn around in your rope, and your rope doesn't fucking get tangled up and shit like that. So, it's great. But having two swivels attached, like, it's a little bit too much inertia. So if you guys remember, or you go back and fucking fast forward it, or I don't know, I'm just recording over my footage right now, so I don't know what's going to happen next, but you might see me struggling a little bit trying to turn it into the proper position, because there's a swivel above the orange carabiner and below. So what I'm going to do next time, I'm not going to tie it to my swivel. I'm either going to tie it to the ring or directly to the bridge, but I think tying it to the ring would be best. And I changed my bridge because this bridge was getting fucking worn out, man. I had partially cut into it once also, among other damages it sustained. So yeah, and it's way too long for my liking. And I made one that was significantly shorter, but it was way too short. So I made a final one, an ultimate one, I guess, that's just a bit shorter than this one. Because this one, what I don't like also is that the bridge is too long, so it's too high. So instead of my device being like at fucking waist or stomach level, it's like practically at fucking eye level. So sometimes it hits me in the face, and other times it's hard to pull up because I have to reach up really high. But anyway, it all depends on your physiology also and how you're built and stuff like that. If you have a tall torso or a short torso or long or short arms and like all this stuff. So, learning the subtleties of my new toy. So I'm going to connect it. I have a shorter bridge now. It's going to connect directly to the ring, but not to my swivel. It's going to be on its own swivel. So I mention all this shit because it fucking makes a big difference. And see, I'm holding on to the limb there, but I'm also using the brake when I descend, so it doesn't want to fucking let me rappel really fast. So if you're holding on to something, or if you have like something anchoring you down, like your feet or whatever, then you don't really need to fucking use the brake, or maybe just give a little tap, taparoo. But anyway, yeah, sorry for the fucking boringness of this fucking video, but I didn't title it fucking how to be a boss with a Spiderjack 3 and how to fucking dwarf everybody. No, this is my first climb with it. I'm learning the fucking subtleties, and I've got about maybe 13 more minutes of footage, but I'm not going to talk over it. I'm going to use that for another video, and I'm very anxious to fucking get back to using this again because it is a lot of fun, guys. It's a lot of fucking fun. So if you like this video, let me know. If not, be sure to fucking leave a negative comment below, downvote, and unsubscribe. Shadowlay, guys. See you next time.